Police are always looking for ways to help them control a volatile situation without putting their own lives in danger. So it's not surprising to discover that a police officer has invented a new device designed to do exactly that, and it's positively electric.
Show me your hands! Show me your hands!
Get out of
Drop
my
the
way!
knife! Drop the knife now! Drop it now!
This is the type of scene that law enforcement officers encounter on a daily basis. They're required to make split-second decisions that can mean the difference between life and death. That's why they need the best training available.
The most prominent type of attack on an officer is with an edge weapon. And locally in Winnipeg, we found that 57% of our deadly force encounters with officers involved an edge weapon. Unfortunately, there was no way to train officers properly to prepare them for that type of acute stress situation out on the street. Here's the scenario.
Jeff Quayle has been a law enforcement officer for 16 years. He spent 5 years teaching survival tactics in Winnipeg. He's also the inventor of the Shocknife.
When the officer is touched by the shark, and I'll just sort of show you here, the shock goes into the body no different than if the officer was cut with a knife.
Typically, officers are trained for weapon attacks using rubber knives, but in his classes, Quayle felt they weren't effective.
You see what happens typically is with a rubber knife, the officer is going to reach and grab the blade of the rubber knife and stay in the fight as opposed to disengaging like they should in a real knife attack. There's no consequences to grabbing the blade of the rubber knife. In reality, that knife would slice his fingers open, cut tendons, and possibly remove his ability to use his firearm if it continues to escalate. Now we're going to replicate the same scenario using the shock knife. Now if he stays into the fight and attempts to grab the blade, there will be consequences for his actions. And we'll see if we can motivate the officer to disengage and escalate to a firearm.
Show me your hands, sir. Show me your hands. Get your hands out here. Drop the knife! Drop the knife now! Put the knife down! Bang!
Right, you can see now, as soon as the officer knows there's going to be consequences when the weapon is presented, the officer rapidly moves away from the weapon. This is what we want them to do in real life.
The Shocknife has been tested in Winnipeg, where it's also manufactured. Here's how it works.
The product is made of a copper-clad material on two sides and has the ability to shock up to 7,500 volts. It's powered by one 9-volt battery, and it works like this. The product can be adjusted in current from very low to very high to be able to inoculate a person to the stress.
The Shocknife's variable levels help to create a training environment where officers experience the same stressful feelings they would in a real attack. It also helps them to develop realistic survival and coping skills.
When we start with static training, where all training starts, we turn the shock knife down to a lower setting so there's not as high a voltage coming out of the knife. This doesn't cause that acute stress in the officer and allows them to basically use the knife as a biofeedback tool. The blade will still deliver a mild shock, but it'll feel more like a paper cut. So it helps to correct their technique as they're learning at a static setting. From there, we elevate the training to what's called stimulus response training. Now we give them specific type of stimulus, a specific type of attacks, and we elevate the shock level again to just add a little bit of arousal in the officer, which is going to help them develop motor skills quicker and faster. And finally, at the end, we introduce dynamic scenario training. This is where we replicate an actual knife attack, and that's when the knives are turned up full blast and causing that acute stress reaction.
The shock knife definitely adds realism to the training, and in comparison to a rubber knife, there's really no consequences of your actions, whereas with the shock knife you feel the impact itself, the cut is there.
But if the Shocknife can improve an officer's decision-making ability when they're under stress, then this short-term pain will be worth the gain.
Stick around, because coming up right after the break, we are back with the Rock On Mindbender. And to get your brain warmed up, here's a question for you. Name the highly magnetic rock used as a compass by the Chinese and the Vikings long ago. We'll have the answer for you right after the break, so don't go away. What do you think?
You already